Hello, my wonderful being, mindfulness being. And we just finished a live on Instagram, which was your first live. And that live, just for those who may not have like tap into, is something that you want to address in terms of what is this, what is the choices that we are making. And because of being the anniversary of the passing of your father, I felt this was a very important tone to our first communication and to our first being present with what it is. It wasn't so much about us you know engaging with what was the aim of our conversation, but we really started with engaging with what was the energy of you as a communicator, and how we elaborated that. So in our past sessions together, we have spoken about unconditional love and how we present it and how we feel like that is just basically showing up to the relationship, not giving up in it. And we have demonstrated that through our time together, because we met at very critical points in our lives. As I say, you in the midst of that loss of father, in the midst of that I lost a husband, I guess. And then in the midst of all those things happening, we lost one another. And then we recap, of course, of our relationship and our practices together. And I came out with this idea of like, what is it that make us prosper in life, which it was the beginning of my conversations, and that we are supporting your conversations and mindful being that happen in life on Tuesdays and 2:30, and these conversations that will be becoming part of something a little bit bigger, more in the YouTube channel, and this prosper. So today we have joined what is no longer present with what we have maintained present by us practicing, with our desire of engaging other people with being present in the life doing 9 to 5, 24/7, of being a human being which is mindful but is also aware of taking responsibility of their own energy, physical, emotional, spiritually, as many levels as we can, so they can understand the world through a center vision that allows them to see from a third person perspective. So back to you.
To me, yes, very, very interesting, how you made the connections. And what really is fascinating to me is that, like this loss, this for me, it's a very first experience of this kind of loss, right? Like I've had loss of relationships when I was younger, which is obviously at that time was like the worst thing that can happen in a lifetime, right? But when I look at it in hindsight, obviously that was just okay, getting to know different people that either work or don't work at 15 years old. Now being in my 40s, it's like, okay, I think that's not so serious. And so thinking also of your, like thinking of a loss in a relationship and just in general of a loss, what a loss means today in the age that we're in, has a different meaning. And I feel like recognizing that our time on this planet in whichever way is limited, like be it in a relationship can be limited, and our actual physical being on this planet is limited, right? And all my focuses, as long as I can remember, was about the present of right now, right? Like being present with all these emotions. And I have noticed throughout the years that that was extremely difficult for a lot of people. Most people rather think about something that they're looking forward to in the future or reminiscent in the past. A lot of people have a really hard time to be present with what is. And I always thought that there was something that I'm not getting or that I don't understand, or like not with conscious, right? Like I just had like I was just always different than other people, but I didn't really make the connection of what that was. And now as we're speaking, it makes me realize it was that I was able to be present with what is, right? Like even with what's happening in the world, right? Like I am not easily entangled emotionally to what's going on. And yet I have to admit that when I am thinking about my dad, about this special day today, and I'm listening to music, that it makes an immediate connection, because you're all of a sudden your brain has this capacity to make life connections be present right now to give you a certain sense of emotion. And I think that's what most people are struggling with, is realizing that our brain has this capacity and we just let it happen, and we're just going into there instead of bringing it into this present moment and moving with it as part of what it is today, right? Like today is a mourning day. That's just what it is. And there will be consistent moments ongoing throughout the day, maybe into tomorrow, and maybe they already started a few days ago, where I don't know why I feel the way I feel. And I think if
You know exactly why you feel like you, yeah, like maybe this is what, okay, let me just, sorry that I caught you there.
no, that's
Uh,
good.
Actually, what you're saying is like you have an anniversary coming, and this is the power of rituals, okay? Because a date, the day that you first kissed someone, the day that you were born, the day that you know gave birth, the day that you started a job, the day that you met someone else, you know, there's elements and their anniversaries and their points of, you know, even like returning to the same coffee place. You know, it's not the same if you're returning to a coffee place where you've been happy, or when you just last have an argument with your partner that you don't want to be going there. They're gonna, so there's an anticipation, and your body is preparing for having a big bluff. In this sense, it's like grievancy of missing and mourning, and I think this is a very important thing, because one of the things that doesn't happen in our life is, well, it happens because if we are present in our relationships, this is how we are. And I mean relationship with what we do for living, we work with other people, with family, and we are developing consistency, you know, relationships. When we're relating to something, we have a chance to relate in consistency. What we are seeing here is that you were capable of anticipating and started to somehow have like an opening to feel more of someone who is not present in the physical, but is actually present in your internal and emotional. So as you are saying, you know, I'm connected with music differently. I mean, we started our life and I could just really feel the that your main thing, it was like, I'm checking with you, that I'm checking with my emotions, because yeah, I am mourning today, and maybe I'm presenting myself here with this. That's the energy I felt like, you know, that I'm presenting myself here with you. I'm not here just representing myself, because today this whole space of awareness is being taken by commemorating the passing of your dad, you know. And I think that's a very powerful thing, because this is again bringing us to you know, we talk about all these subconscious things, you're preparing, knowing that this date, having all the things that you have done, arrange it, and then showing up for the first thing to say, dude, this is me showing up to these lives I want to do, but this is me showing to you as I am, mourning my father today, celebrating his life, feeling invincible because I feel his strength behind me. So those are very strong points that bring you to be mindful in your present.
Well, thank you. Thank you for putting this all together with a nice bow on top. And one thing that I also recognize is I actually, since his passing, realized that I am never showing up just for myself at this point, right? That was as sad as it is that someone has to pass to have this recognition, I do believe it's almost impossible to have that same sentiment before. Like when people are still here, and this is what makes it so difficult for us to cherish all these moments at all times, and even cherish those fights we have, because sometimes those fights, to me at least, are only a demonstration of how much we care about someone that is still alive. Once they're gone, you can't be upset with them anymore, because like, what's the point of this? That'd be one, rude, right? Like to be upset with someone that's no longer here. And two, there is like no reconciliation, right? And I feel like the reconciliation is really what makes, and again, our relationship is part of that recognition, right? It's like we gotta fight, we gotta have arguments, we gotta have disagreements to make a deeper connection with someone. If we don't have disagreements, if we don't have these emotional expressions with one another, then why are we here in the first place? Like, why are we having this conversation if I don't have an emotional connection with you? Like, what's the point? And I think this is what many people push down, is that they don't let their emotions to be shown. I'm not saying like be rude, be angry, be like hurtful to other people, but find a way to express your strong emotions in a way that they can be expressed and not suppressed.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of like one of the things that it happens when we operated in the present, I mean, on the past or in the future scenes, because when we are fighting with the past, we're wasting time because we cannot change that. So we are ruminating things that we have no action over. And when we talk about the future, we are prognosticating and we identify with something, and then we need to really double cross check if the identification with the future is actually online or in line with the actions that we're taking to approach that. Meaning, I want to be fit, but my choice today would be having 2 liters of Coca-Cola and you know, three sneakers, which is a person that sits in front of the salon who has this ritual and is becoming a phenomenal observation. And this is guy who really show up normally when Kate is coming, like every 8 weeks, and he has this ritual. He goes to the shop, buys 3 sneakers doubles and a liter of Coca-Cola, and he sat in his car and he's drinking before going home or whatever that he does. And it's fascinating as a ritual. But again, this is a really important point. When we are having these type of rituals which are like diminishing to our energy, that we are somehow like doing it in a bit of a guilty feeling, but that we are and I say by guilty feeling, it means that the what we want to create in the future and what we're doing in the present, they're not coordinating. Okay, this is an important thing to just see what is it that is discomforting in that current moment, because the discomfort may have started a lot before. Discomfort may be not being able to deal with the emotion or having lost someone, you know. And this is like a guilty moment or like a pleasure, you know, that makes that this person have put in their life to maneuver an amount of emotions or things that they are not really being spoken about, that we may not have that ability. So what would you say are the key prompt questions to acknowledge yourself and your energy in a positive way, especially when you are in grievancy?
I think for everyone it's very, very different. I mean, like for me personally, music is the go-to. And the interesting thing is that my family grew up with with music, right? So just a quick story: when the 2 days prior to my dad's passing, he was in the hospital, and my mom and I would drive home from the hospital every day. And every time there were all the songs we remembered, right? That I started to integrate into this it wasn't a PowerPoint, like it was like a video that I made with pictures from him as part of the funeral, and with music in the background. And it was all the musics that we heard on these drives from the hospital home, and I would make notes what they were. And today, this one song popped into my head unrelated to him. I started listening to it. I put it on YouTube as just listening. And then every song followed was a song that would either have a connection with him or would just be like one song I played with you earlier, would just be something to remember why we're doing what we're doing and what's the connection to that person, right? And so to me, that music is something that is unrelated to you. Like, you didn't write this, you didn't create this, and they're telling a story from their own perspective that you can now recreate for your own story, right? And so that's where I always love to go to, because music is just such a like a universal thing, and it's just the number one connection to me, right? And so all of a sudden I have a new playlist for this first anniversary, and I guarantee you that in a year from today I will do the exact same thing. That's for me. For other people, it might be dancing, which I will add to that too. And then for others, it's just really just take a time, find a place that maybe you connect to that person, if we're talking about a loss per se. But but then again, like, there's so many different ways, I think, that you can process information, and you have to use whatever comes natural to you.
Yeah, and I think this is gonna mean like maybe I always thought, for example, science fiction was part of like science fiction, making films in the science fiction or narratives in the science fictions. It was part of projecting, like those people that can't really project the the time where people are living in a community, you know, because I think they're really very much like science fiction has always lived the future. Even if you see the phones that we have now, even if you see, like, you know, like you go back to the future and it's like, oh, you know, everyone is working now in pedals like that. Like, it's not obviously on suspending on air yet, but you know, like there's a lot of mopeds and there's a lot of things that they are happening. And the same with, like, you know, how we relate to our houses. If you have an intelligent house, if you know, all these things have been created. And equally, and I'm just thinking about this person. I was doesn't speak English, and I recognize myself in this too. But like the other day, like they put me this song, and it was like, can you translate it for me? The point was that the song was perfect for actually what he was unable to say he was experiencing, you know. And this song was basically saying something like, you know, I have tried, I have fought, I'm trying to remain strong, but you know, I'm failing to do so, you know. And it was just like he was just really attached to that song, but not necessarily with the awareness of what the lyrics are. So yes, what music does, what food does, what taste, anything that can be explored by our senses is actually a way of reminding, a way of connecting. So yes, it will be different for everyone, but then again, it's like, what is the ritual that you are making? Can you give meaning? So for example, the man that eats like those three uh, sneakers and the coke, if there was a meaning for him on that, if it was somehow become more aware of the action, then it's what I felt too. Like, you were feeling empowered, you were feeling back up by your dad. Like, this is like how you show up to this ritual of like remembering him in a way that you're not only accepting the loss, but you're also receiving, you know. And culturally, I think we're grieving and we're losing people, you know, like, because we have lost religion. And because for example, in a Catholic thing, you would go to church, you would have you know, you would have a ceremony like commemorating that. You would be able to put a candle, you would be able to go through the smaller communities of that celebrate that day, the passing of someone. We have lost these tiny rituals, and it's important that we start giving them a space, whatever it is, like, having that moment of where you are cooking your favorite mom or family recipe, or listen to that song, or associating new songs, because you are actually changing, but you are not really stuck to the negative charge, that maybe listening to the songs that are associating of like your dad passing by and your mom and you sharing that moment, or driving. Now you have new songs. We actually like add new things. So it's about also doing the ritual and progressing the ritual, but still giving that space to know that, okay, all these tiny things that I'm maybe doing are, I like, in my dedication to, with awareness, celebrate this, acknowledging that, hear myself, and hear the echo of this person in my life.
I love what you're saying, because all it reminds me of is that not to stay stagnant and not to stay like, this is it, this is what I'm doing. Like for me, life is just the way you described it, is an expansion of who I am. Like I am not at my limit until I die. Like I can expand it. Like you might not, well, I might not just physically expand. I hope not as much as I mentally can expand, but it's like, it's incredible. Our brains can just hold so much. And I feel like this is what excites me about this work, about mindfulness, about, what you do, about all these things that I see a lot of my friends are doing, is like, it just fills up more, more, more. And it's not even, it doesn't cost us anything. It's not financially connected. It's just an expansion of experience, and it's just like, wow, like I cannot describe this feeling I have just thinking about expansion, because it's just like explosion of emotions, of like knowledge, of just so much unknown. And I think this is what I want to celebrate more of, is like the unknown of the things that we are coming across, right? Like I started saying like, oh, I didn't know why I was feeling that way. You obviously made it clear, no, you did know what you were feeling, why you were feeling the way you were feeling, but making the connection to here. And I was writing a short story in my stories. I write a little thing about like, we always try to make sense as human beings, right? Like we want to make sense why I'm doing this, making sense why I'm hurting, making sense of all these things that are happening to us, to the world, to whatever, right? And sometimes I wonder, it's like, maybe we don't need to know. We don't need to make sense of everything all the time. It might actually be interesting to not know and just go with it. I'm like, wow, wasn't that interesting that that was the next song coming? How perfect is this song? And actually, there is one part, I have a chapter in my upcoming book, and it's Living and Dying, which obviously is about the experience with my dad. And at the end of that chapter, I'm talking about perfection. And I'm talking it in a way that is, perfection isn't something we know how it looks like. Just the same, we don't know how peace looks like, right? Like maybe peace is not kumbaya, we're all happy and ever after. Maybe what we're living is peace. That maybe this is what it is. Having all these stuff going on at the same time. Maybe this is it. Who knows? Maybe perfection is making a whole bunch of mistakes. Maybe that is perfection, right? Like, who says perfection is not making mistakes? Who said that something perfect is like pristine and I never, who says, right? Like, it's us as humans who created that kind of perfection. But perfection is not defined by nature that way. Because if you look at something perfect in nature, it wouldn't describe anything perfect in a dictionary that humans brought up. And so, how are we making sense of life in the first place if I look at it from that angle,
Yeah. And also one of the things that maybe with this sense of perfection is this sense of like elongated something, you know, like, and because we are talking today about you know, how we find prosperity, connecting with that, how we prosper for relationships, and we prosper for long-term relationship, and how we attend this relationship when they're no longer there, and how we show to them. And one element that was important of, like what we're saying in the ritual, you were doing a ritual, you were presenting your life, first honoring the fact that you are missing your dad, or you are celebrating his passing today. But it was me becoming aware that that's what you do, and they give you the insight of what I say. All right, like, you know, so it's really important, that sense of acknowledging. But also the other point I want to say is that I see something that is very crucial, that we have a really bad relationship with in the world at the moment, which is animals, and what animals do represent. In one side, we kill everything, and we see in the supermarket as part of like our shopping list, you know. And in another sense, if we have pets, I see more a tendency to rescue pets with, you know, one leg, or, you know, to rescue like kind of like animals that actually, you know, they should be passing, but we are so attached to them that we put them, you know, dogs are going through cancer treatment, or going through certain things, and it's like, are we really losing the connection with what actually in this way we're seeing the brutality of someone can do for a fanatic vision of like living better in the afterworld, of killing someone else, you know, in real time, just to fulfill that prophecy, you know, to in an act of terrorist, you know. But I really feel there is a very fine line that I don't know if it's humanizing us more or less, because we are putting a lot of blind spots to all the processes of losing. And actually, what we were talking today is that life is a process of losing and re-encountering, and then, as you're saying, expanding until you no longer can expand, because, you know, we may not be alive. So
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just fascinating. My perspective on life is just not what we make it seem, is what it is for me. Like, what really, like, as you maybe notice, like, I get really excited about, technically speaking, nothing, right? Like, and that's what I find, what I would love for people to recognize more, that we can get excited about very little, but like really, like the smallest thing of like, oh, like this morning I looked out the window and I saw, oh, these must be clouds. I was like, oh, it could be maybe really interesting how the sun is going to look once it reaches the height of the cloud. I mean, like really silly, right? Or when I cross that field, I'm like, oh, wow, look at those clouds. They look really interesting. I've never seen them like this. And it's like a mundane thing. Like clouds are there almost every day unless we have a blue sky, right? It's like really recognizing that there can be awe and like amazement and beauty in all the things that we're touching, that might have been something I looked at all along, but all of a sudden, with new information that you shared with me, I all of a sudden see this picture differently, right? And so this is why it's so important to be present and really listen to what people are saying, because it will make an impact on our brain. And that brain information will have an impact on how we sense things in our bodies. And I love how you said earlier, it's like, when we tune into our senses more, therefore we're present, and we actually embody whatever happened in the past and whatever is in the future of right here. Isn't that what we live for? Isn't this why we're here on this earth, to be present and experiencing things that happened in the past and noticing how they showcase themselves right now, without being attached to how it was, but recreating it as we go, because that will make every single day, every single moment even more exciting and like curious and interesting.
well, I think like that you pointed at something that, just so people that maybe listen, they don't feel like either you're going crazy, or or that, or that,
Probably.
no, because actually, like, to have that awareness, to look at the clouds and feel wow by then. And this is me, someone who recognized that I am able to do this now, but I wasn't before. So let's break this point over, because there is a process of minusing everything. There is a process that you need to enter in your living, and that process is start by being discomfort and being surrendering and being equalizing and being balancing and by being recentering yourself, which is not an easy one. And you and I have gone through different like levels of training. And what I don't want it to for people to think is that you get to look at the cloud. Maybe if you were a sailor, or maybe in the past when people just like dedicate themselves to other things, and maybe they have a more like natural relationship with nature. Maybe this was something that humans were able to do before. But now, as we actually have so much cloudiness in our head, in our feelings, in we want to, our tantrums of like losing something, and even if you have thousand things, you focus into, I lose that pendant, or I lose that thing, like minds get like really busy, trafficky there. And actually like giving yourself that moment of wowing is not something easy to happen. Maybe for a child it is. Maybe in a child we can just see, that, well, Christmas is coming, so they're looking at the paper is the most amazing thing that they can do. But this is a reminder of like how we lose perspective of the big things, because there's a lot of traffic in our heads, and that the journey to get there is not an easy, but it's an available journey. So what would be the steps you say or that got you into being able to really feel at that peace and at that sense of you know fulfillment in the little things?
I mean, the first thing is just to not feel like, to change just the idea of thinking that big equals better, that something I buy is better than something I get for free. Well, actually, I think a lot of people like things for free, but not taking things that are for free that I don't just get for free, like nothing tangible, like nature, for example, is free, right? We don't pay to go into nature. And yet we, well, depends where, but most of the places you can get to, or rather not all nature, but most nature. You can go touch a tree, some park, just for free. Anyway, mainly. And so what I'm recognizing is, I think it's just this conditional trained thinking that something that humans created is more valuable than things that have been given to us, like life has been given to us, so we take it for granted, right? Not realizing that if you are lucky enough that you don't have a sight disability, that you don't have a hearing disability, that you don't have a physical disability, that you don't have a disability we can't see, if there is everything right with you, you are one of the lucky ones, and you probably don't even know how lucky we are, right? For those people who have experienced certain disadvantages in going through life, be it an actual physical thing or an internal thing, like an immunal type of thing, right? They might recognize being human as something very extraordinary and special already, right? So I'm talking to the people who might not be as, or
aware
might have been
aware of the
of the luck. Yeah, exactly. And so I think I'm speaking to them. And so by recognizing that, oh, you know what? If I only had one arm, if I only had one sight to see, if I had to wear glasses all the time, which actually is a lot of people, so maybe that's not an easy one to recognize, but yet that is too one thing that you have to add, right? And that's where I would start, is just by understanding that I'm very fortunate in the life that I'm living. So gratitude would be one of the first things I would say, right? Like understanding the privilege to be human, to be in this body would be the beginning. Because if I can't recognize that as something big, then how will I even recognize everything else? And I think that's already a big step. I see, like for many people, it's like, okay, so what, like, but yeah, like you can go to work and just get a regular job. Some people can't take a regular job. They have to apply to many different kind of jobs, have to go apply to jobs that have a certain focus on people that might have a certain disease or something, right? So we are not recognizing those parts. A lot of us who are complaining about our everydays are probably very fortunate, let's put it that way, right? And so it's for us to recognize, like, wow, I can just hop into a car and drive to the train station, right? Or, oh, I actually have a job. There's a lot of people don't even have a job, right? And so to recognize those things first, that the things I already have are something to celebrate for. And once I see and recognize those things, I'm actually able to see the other things. Before that, you won't be. I mean, yes, I can teach you and say, like, hey, just walk out into nature every day and look at the weather and make a judgment of that. But at some point, that'd be like, yeah, okay, I've done it for a few days, I'm good, So it might not have a bigger impact. But if I would tell you, as of tomorrow, you'll have to walk to the train station. As of tomorrow, you lose your job. As of tomorrow, your partner is not supporting you anymore. What would change then? What realization would you have then? And that's when you start appreciate and recognize the things that you have as something very huge.
Right, just so we can wrap this with a bit of a recap. Recognizing the gone and the present, and finding a way in where we can communicate that to ourselves from a space of possibility and fulfillment is the key of somehow introducing this sense of being happier with less and with things that are not necessarily created or present, like because we talk about not having missing or grieving someone in our lives, that was a very important role, and how that person potentially is actually more valuable now that they are not in our life that they may have been while they were living, and it's that sense of like, yeah, nature is there and it's free, but if we are not paying attention, if we only are like really looking for things that are things we have to invest, buy or have, what we are feeling is that process of voidness, which is stop us from being able to be present because we haven't obtained something that is farther. So it's actually one of the journey that we can ask people that may not want to go through a yoga training or mindfulness training or any kind of training, is just right, reassess your gone with your present, with what is actually available to you to be grateful for, instead of like position yourself really outside of those equations. And the more that you have moments in your day where you are grateful for, as you say, having a job, having a warm house, having a partner with who to argue or not, having a friend with who to connect, even if they're not responding or not. These are like elements that will help us to slowly, more conscious and present way of celebrating what is in the present moment.
Yes, exactly.
Right. So would you like to add anything else to our conversation of this week? Or?
I mean, you said it just so beautifully, because at the end of the day, it's an inside job, and that's where we have to begin. And I feel like in humanity, our training is to focus on what's outside of ourselves. We're not learning how to take care of ourselves internally. We have not learned how to express ourselves externally in a healthy way without being a
No,
certain way. So I think, yeah.
I was just saying this is funny because I feel like in parenting nowadays is a very difficult thing, because you guys, the ones that are parents, are really training this new generation to feel about themselves. And you were saying this last week about your son when he's like, do you have to do mindfulness everywhere? Why do you come to my school? And it's like, I'm teaching him to be able to be okay with me doing something in his school and me not feeling, So I do think that humans haven't not been able in other generation, but that we are preparing future generations to actually have this first cross-checking with the self. And it's important to balance, because I don't think in the past everything that they did was wrong. So I don't know about this power that we are giving to these new generations in terms of like, be centered with the eye, what will be the tools, because we have gone through this route, like there's millennia of people that just saying, like observing and saying their trainings and their things, so they have more of a possibility. But I already think, I have this conversation with Raluca the other day at work. So her daughter have, you could call it special needs or whatever, but basically the daughter is saying to her mom, the school is too long. There's too many hours. It's not that I don't like it school, it's just that the too many hours. So she's like, what do I do? Do I push her to do something she doesn't want to? Do I not? And it's like, in the past, going to the school was a given, but like now it's like, where do I put that choice? Where do I enable? Or when I say I'm not gonna, I want her to be herself or express herself, but in where really like the environments are less and less prone to do so, because she's a mother that has been, she's actually homeschooling one of her child, because he have really more severe needs than her. But she's like, Anna, I'm pushing my daughter to do things she doesn't want to do. So it's a really interesting, preparation for a new terrain, which parents are definitely doing in the current time.
Yeah, I think there is both. I think we are in this transition of changing, those generational traditions in a way. And I, like, from my personal parenting time, which has only been 9 years, so there's not much to say right at this moment, but from what I've experienced in these 9 years, it's not been the easy way. Like, it wasn't like a one-way street, right? Like, sometimes you're like, oh, maybe that was too much, like listening to a child, right? And I think it's important information, like the example that you made when the child says like, it's too many hours in a day. And that is just to recognize, like, maybe it's not the hours, it's maybe what you do throughout those hours, right? Like, I think you can still teach children something in a much more playful way, and I don't think they would consider this long, right? If it's something playful, because it's like, oh, we're playing, I'm having fun. Like, so I think that is what I'm hearing also, is like, it's not about then cutting the hours short. Okay, it's too long, that's what they say. Like, maybe it's how we're teaching them that is draining the children, right? It's not the information per se, because they are sponges. These children can take in a lot of information, even those that have some other abilities, right? And so with that aspect, I think it's more of a question like, how can I tune in to the abilities that these children have that serve them in the long run? Because one thing is clear, we can't change the environment that we're in so drastically, because then it can also fall apart, right? We need to make it in a very gentle and patiently way, which is not always possible. And so there's clashes going to happen. So at the end of the day, bringing all these new nuances into the conversation, which probably can be a whole nother conversation we're going to talk about, right? And around raising children in this day and age comparison to in the past. But what I do feel like is that no matter what our intentions are, we have zero idea the impact it will have if it's a good impact, right? Like, again, my child is 9 years old. I will know in 30, 40 years if how I was raising my child has a positive impact on how I did it, or maybe not. Like, I don't know. And it's not clear if the way I did it was the same way that someone else did it has the same impact. Like, every individual, and I'm talking about even children individuals, will take information in a different way. So even if the modalities are the same, by listening to our children, teaching them to express them emotionally, doesn't necessarily mean that the outcome will be across the board the same, because they're still individuals. They all have historically different inputs into their nervous system. So what I experienced as a child is different that my child experienced, and yet there is something in our ancestry that is going through my son's genetics, that is going through other kids' genetics, that taking in, expressing their emotions in that way might have a total different impact. And so I think this is what really is hard to describe or to define, if those kind of parenting skills that we're implementing these days have that positive impact that we're looking for in the future. Time will tell. We might know, we might not know, and find out, right? So yeah, so much more to say.
I like that you put a 30 years in the making. So maybe we here 30 years, like assessing your parenting
We
skills.
will be. We will be.
And your son in the background said, like,
He'll be joining me.
kids. All right, well, we wrap it here for everyone. Thank you for watching us. We will continue these conversations. Sometimes lead us to more questions, and sometimes lead us to hopefully some insights that you can just make part of your joy of being present and enjoying clouds and just all that we already have, because compared to other generations, we do have a lot. Even the possibility of communicating with another being by just not even being in the same place and not even being on the presence, but these conversations being able to be consumed at any time by anyone who wants to tune with us. So with that said, I'll see you next week. Take care, my gorgeous. Lots of love.
Lots of love. Bye.
Oh.